The Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 236, recorded December 30th, 2019. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today as always is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, today we are going to be talking about the series finale of Mr. Robot. It's a two-parter, but we're just going to go through the whole thing as one thing. We're going to be taking a little bit of a different tact. We're not going to be breaking it down plot point by plot point. We're just going to kind of freestyle this one and go over it and talk about kind of the series as a whole a little bit too, I'm sure. So yeah, let's just jump right in. So, this series finale finally answers the question that was brought up last week as to what this whole weird alternate reality thing is. And it's basically...
I was right.
I agreed with you. I was bringing up different possibilities, but yeah, I mean...
Yeah, you agreed. I know.
People that thought it was going to be the alternate reality thing, like, I don't know what to say to you.
I was like, people were expecting, people had been expecting a long time for this to take a sci-fi twist at the end, and I didn't really think Sam Esmail was going to commit to a science fiction twist all of a sudden in the last episode.
Yeah, that's not what the series is about.
Right, exactly. That's not what the series has been about. You know, he's teased it, he put Easter eggs in there, the whole Back to the Future was an Easter egg, but that's all it was, just teases and Easter eggs. He wasn't going to seriously commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's just not what the show was about. The show was about, mental illness.
Yeah.
So, if you're gonna have something that seems like a sci-fi twist, it's probably playing more into the unreliable narrator aspect of the show. And therefore playing into mental illness.
Which people had to remember, Elliot is an unreliable narrator, has been an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, from the first episode. It was clear that this was very heavily inspired by Fight Club.
Yeah.
And had that unreliable narrator aspect that just became clear as things went on. Then we had shit like the prison twist.
We had the prison twist
in season 2 or 3, whenever that happened.
Flat out tells you he's an unreliable narrator, in case you didn't get it before.
Yeah.
He flat out tells you to your face he's an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
So, yeah.
This is what Mr. Robot is. So people looking at these kind of obvious sci-fi clues kind of things like it's some regular narrative show, you're kind of missing the point,
Right.
This is a very grounded in reality show. Anything that seemed more fantastical was something taking place in the mind.
Right, yes.
Season 1 had a kind of a weird ending that seemed somewhat fantastical, but that was all because it was in Elliot's mind.
Right, exactly.
And so every time there is something like that, you had that weird Alf episode. That's not a space-time anomaly. That's Elliot's head.
Yeah, Alf didn't really appear in the universe of Mr. Robot.
And run over somebody.
Run over somebody. That was in Elliot's head. Yeah.
Yes. That's kind of the whole point. So, yeah. So, I'm glad he didn't take some weird twist. That would have just been, as much as we've been saying that this isn't the kind of show it is and it's not doing it, was there secretly a part of you that was like, oh god, please don't do that?
No, I had confidence. Weirdly enough, I had confidence that this wasn't what we, especially with the way, the alternate universe was set up to, be perfect. I thought that was, the biggest tell that it wasn't real. Because I just, because for that to have been real would kind of betray, the entire ideology of the series, right? Where the world isn't perfect, the world is a messy place, and then to have, but there can be a perfect world is kind of what the hell are you trying to say? What's the message?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. I had a little bit of concern, but that's just because I worry. I'm always oh no, please don't, no, please don't have this happen. I'm just always worried. I had faith that they were going in the right direction, but I worried a little bit. The people that were excited about that possibility of that twist, I just don't I don't understand them.
Right. Right.
I'm all for like weird sci-fi stuff. Like, honestly, I think like if this was like some random weird police procedural and it got canceled but only had like a few episodes left to make and they had time to plot them, then yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
But this is like a well-crafted drama about mental illness, Like,
right.
let's conclude that the way it should be concluded, This isn't like Law and Order where it's like nobody will give a shit about how it ends.
But I did love, especially like the ending of the first part was like where Elliot kills his perfect, like, alternate universe, like, self, and then like he turns to you and he says, don't judge me, I thought that was like that was like, bam, that was a shocker of an ending for that episode. I just thought, damn, Elliot. and it ties in too because then we see all the little things too, like in the next episode where he's trying to pack up the corpse of the Elliot he just killed and he's trying to move it, and Dom appears
as like a street cop
and she has to see his ID and he hands her the ID and says he's Elliot Alderson, and she looks at it and says you look nothing like the guy in this ID.
Well, I think her exact wording it wasn't like look, like that was implied to us, but it's like you're nothing like him.
Yeah, you're nothing like him. But it's the same thing. So, yeah.
I think it's intentional not to say look, because what they're saying is that he isn't like the actual Elliot, that he's different than the actual Elliot. But in order to pass that off without giving away the goose entirely, they have to like make it sound like she's saying, it's by his appearance.
And that, that leads me into what I was thinking about earlier today, where, that leads into like, the big twist was like that we finally find out who the third alter is. And as some people on the internet have surmised, the third alter is Elliot. Depending on how you look at it, because we find out that there's another alter, the Mastermind, which is apparently who we've been
Elliot
following.
We've known all along, yeah.
Yeah, the Elliot we've known all along, and the real Elliot was the alter that apparently like Darlene was talking about when Vera showed up again for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That was the real Elliot.
Yeah, so he somehow slipped back into reality in that moment.
Yeah, which is weird because I don't think they explained, because they explained like the Mastermind they explained the whole alternate universe
they went a little logic loose towards the end of the season.
They did. They explained that the entire alternate universe that we see is actually like a prison the Mastermind created for the real Elliot. So the Mastermind can take full control of Elliot and do as he pleased. And the reason Darlene doesn't exist in this reality is because Darlene is like a conduit that Elliot has such a strong connection to Darlene that he could use her to escape. And so there is no Darlene. Is the way they explained it. But one thing they didn't explain though is why I
still buy my theory that if it was a perfect world, then Darlene couldn't be in it because she's the cause of everything that's wrong in our world.
They didn't say that. They just said like
That's my theory.
Yes.
Last week.
Well, it's not canon, but it's interesting. But it's interesting because they didn't explain though that then why did when Vera showed up again was Elliot able to come back out for that brief period?
They went a little bit logic loose and focused more on the character story of it. The kind of puzzle pieces kind of fell to the background,
right?
A bit.
I think that's
is a little bit of a shame.
Yeah,
but
it's a little bit of a shame because normally and even this like the twists are like very well constructed. I don't think this has been. I do feel like this has been planned from the beginning, despite like some mistakes like that. Because and this points to what you had just brought up, and what I was thinking is like with the twists. SNL has been masterful with the twists in the show, because they all feel very organic. When they come out, they surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
and they make sense, and they're organic to what came before. You can actually go back through and kind of pick out, like, oh shit, you're right, the scene, like, the hints are all along. And the magic of that is, like, he is able to do that without you, like, guessing the twists ahead of time.
I mean, the first twist the series had, the first, like, huge twist, was telegraphed simply by how Fight Club the show was.
Right.
The show was so Fight Club that we knew that the twist was going to be that Mr. Robot was his imaginary friend / multiple personality.
I think what's magic about it though is he is able to craft these twists that you should be able to figure out, because he breadcrumbs the clues all throughout the series. So you should be able to pick up the clues and figure it out. But you don't, because and this is where, like, I compare him to a magician, because he's like a magician because he uses misdirection to kind of fool you or to distract you from the trick. So like the clues are there, and you should be following the clues to the conclusion, but he's the entire time he's distracting you, or he's tricking you in some way. Like the whole reveal with the mastermind, it makes sense, but you don't pick up on that because you're not aware that there is a third altar for most of the series, and so for most series you are watching the mastermind, but you're just thinking, oh, that's Elliot for the entire thing. And you're not really, like, you're not looking for him. And that in and of itself is misdirection.
Yeah.
It's masterfully
it's good,
done.
And it's really well done, but as the series reached its conclusion, like I said, it went a little logic loose.
Yeah.
And as a result, certain things kind of like just didn't add up properly, or just didn't have a proper connection in. And that's just a matter of, there's always going to be like loose ends that you kind of put off. And when you get to the point where you have to close those loose ends, sometimes you have a lot that you put in there for misdirects and for other reasons that now you have to close out.
Right.
And they're not necessarily going to work out well, So there's a few things that went a little bit loose.
Yeah, like I think the whole thing with Varys showing up in the revelation of the third altar was done a little sloppy, just because Esmail had to put that revelation into the viewer's mind heading into the end of the season. Because if we went through the season without an inkling of a third altar, then, the revelation at the end would kind of seem like an asshole,
Well, I mean, White Rose's plan in general was a little sloppy at the end, too, because she had to have something more than just some delusion in order to have that much power behind her. Like, doing every bit of her whim,
Right.
So that's a little bit of something that doesn't quite make sense, is how is the Dark Army following her when her whole thing is just this crazy fantasy?
Right.
Like, there should have been more to it. Not necessarily her actual plan, but there had to have been maybe something underneath it. And they just kind of abandoned that idea.
Maybe she was just that good at selling it.
I guess that's what they're saying, but...
Right. Because, well, they're definitely saying that her fantasy of a perfect world, it was a delusion. They're basically saying she was delusional.
Like I think that's the only way it could have been. But there should have been something else, like something else that's gained by her plan that explained why people were following her. You know what I mean? Kind of like, as a side effect of her doing this plan, they're also gaining power in these areas. And that wasn't kind of explained that well, kind of because they couldn't, because they had to like carry up the delusion as this possibility all the way up to the point at which she killed herself.
Right.
And then once you get to that point, it's like, you're past that now. So why are you going to try to explain these back things? But that's why I said, like, you can get a little logic loose on a show like this.
Yeah, well,
when you're wrapping it up, when you're wrapping things up, because certain things you're like, okay, this thread is kind of frustrating and not really well explained, but we're at a point in the story now where it's like, if we try to explain this, it's going to be kind of going backwards.
Well, yeah, I think what happened is they wrote themselves into a corner with that, because if they admit that White Rose like had something there, then then they're kind of forced to take the show in a sci-fi direction.
Yes.
And so they kind of like had to be like either White Rose is delusional or this is a science fiction show now. And that's kind of where they ended up at. So yeah, it was a little bit sloppy, but yeah, they wrote themselves into a corner there.
Yeah, definitely. It's when you get into higher concept stuff, that's the risk.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you're ending a series, because when you haven't ended it yet, you can keep certain threads open. But when you're ending something down, then those threads, if they're open and they're not explained well and something comes up that's contradictory to them and you're not explaining why that contradictory thing is still okay. And the reason they don't explain it is because, like I said, it's like going backwards. It's like, we're past this point. This is no longer important to the story.
Right.
So why are we going to focus on explaining this now? And so that's the problem, is that you create these things that reach that point of you could explain them and find a way to do it in a satisfactory way, but by doing so, you're going backwards and you're ruining the actual main plot of the show.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so that's the tricky thing. This is why, like, I'll talk to people when people got so upset about Game of Thrones, and I understand, you know, being upset about it. Like, I was disappointed in it myself and stuff, but when people got so disappointed,
I will be the first to admit that Game of Thrones, the ending was completely rushed. I agree.
Yeah, but the thing is, I always try to explain to some people when I do get the chance is that endings are hard.
They are.
And difficult. The higher concept the show is, the harder it is to pull off. And try to put yourself into the position of a showrunner that's weaving all of these things and has to come to a coherent conclusion. And then you have these plot threads that are no longer have any purpose to you. And if you take the time to explain them, you're just slowing down other things at that point. So it becomes like a lesser of two evils situation where you're like, okay, I have to leave this plot thread dangling. I have to give this one up because if I don't, I'm going to sink the rest of the story.
Right.
And that's kind of what ended up happening here. And it's something you see a lot in higher concept shows. And it's why a lot of higher concept shows don't necessarily have the greatest endings. You go into something that's more simplistic, like say, and I'm not saying simplistic in a bad way, like Breaking Bad, you know, there's no genre aspect to Breaking Bad. It's straight up, it's crime drama, you know? It's really good crime drama, and it's able to come to a really satisfying conclusion because there is no, like, is there an alternate world discussion plot point, you know? They don't ever have that in the series to contend with, you know? So that never becomes an issue later down the line. So it's the degree of difficulty is lesser in nailing that ending. When you get to anything that's going to be in sci-fi or fantasy, or that's going to even scrape that surface, which is what Mr. Robot does. Mr. Robot doesn't actually go into sci-fi and fantasy, but it scrapes that surface, you know? And when you do that, it's a higher degree of difficulty to close things out in a satisfactory way. It just is. So you kind of have to like accept that certain things are going to be imperfect, but that doesn't mean it's not good. And that's like perfectly the case with Mr. Robot. There's a lot of great there in that finale.
Right, absolutely. Like, well, I thought, yeah, despite the flaws, and believe me, like, in my opinion, the flaws that we brought up are very, very minor. I do not actually care about the specifics of why Elliot came out when Varys showed up. I do not care. It's not important to the plot. It's not important to like the message of what's going on in the finale. You know, it's just this little thing. So, you know, it's just when I bring it up, it's not like oh my god, they fucked up. It's like, no, it's just a nitpick.
No, we're just being critical and we're pointing things out.
Yeah, we're just pointing things. It's just a nitpick. It's not a big deal, overall. And I would say, overall, in my opinion, he stuck the landing beautifully and that is with like a show like this, as he said, with something as high concept as Mr. Robot. That is incredibly difficult.
Yes.
And in my opinion, SML absolutely managed a completely beautiful ending that brought everything together just wonderfully and ended Elliot's story on a very poignant note. I thought the most powerful thing was the mastermind finally, realizing who he was and then relinquishing control.
Yes.
Back to Elliot.
Yes, exactly. And the thing with Mr. Robot also is that not only do you have these kind of like near genre plot points that you have to like address in some way or let go, which is going to disappoint people, and like we mentioned, but also because it's a show about mental illness, which is real, that's not like a fictional thing.
Right.
You have to handle it with a certain degree of sensitivity.
Well, yeah, you can't read the ending of the episode as Elliot's cured now, because he's not.
You have to be careful in the way you handle things, and you have to handle it in a very elegant way so that you don't like give this wrong message, basically.
Right.
Because you're talking about something real, you know? So you can't just go like, okay, whatever serves the plot at that point. Like, you can't do that. You have to like take into account the effect you're having as well. And that raises the degree of difficulty even further. But when you nail it, it kind of has this satisfying tinge of like emotional relevance to it.
I think they were pretty clear that while the mastermind was able to come to terms with his identity and was able to relinquish control, he didn't disappear. He didn't go away. Mr. Robot doesn't go away.
Mommy and Kitty It don't go away.
Yeah, all of Elliot's alters don't go. They're still there. They're still a part of Elliot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, I guess for the most part, like, they all have like a better sense of self. And for Elliot himself, he now has more control. They make
a good point too about Darlene.
There's more of a balance.
Yeah. Well, they make a good point too about Darlene, because Darlene, when he kind of is breaking this to her and she like already knows this, you know, she's like, I could tell that you were different, those kind of things, those aspects where she could understand that. She talks about the fact that she wasn't ready for everything that Elliot was going through when he was going through it when they were younger. And she just pieced out.
Right.
And left. And how guilty she felt about that. And she's back in his life now. So what they're saying isn't that he's cured and everything's, hunky-dory now. What they're saying is that where he needed Mr. Robot and all these alters as a crutch to get by before, now he has Darlene. And that was an important aspect of having her there in the room with him in that moment.
And that was
to show, like, he still needs help, but now he has human help. He has like a person there that cares about him.
That was also like telegraphed when they made it known that Darlene was so important to Elliot that the mastermind had to basically put Elliot in this world where she doesn't exist and isn't known to him. That's how important she was, in the mastermind's attempt to retain total control. He basically took her away from him.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically say, that as a form of support, as a crutch for Elliot, like, Darlene is super important.
Yes. And that's it makes it much more powerful in that moment when the mastermind does relinquish control to Elliot, and having Darlene there, knowing that and being there in that moment is what makes it so like emotionally poignant.
Yes.
In that moment. Like, Darlene is the glue that holds all that together. Because without her presence there, him relinquishing that doesn't really tell us anything. But with her there, it's basically saying that in addition to, giving up control because his time is over, it's giving up control because Darlene is there to pick up the pieces.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, that's the end of Mr. Robot and how we kind of felt about it. What do you think now, looking back on the series as a whole? Just like not how it closed out, but just in its place in the pantheon of television.
I think it's what if we're to do like a best series of the decade, it's definitely in the top 5. It's that good.
Yeah,
it's that good.
I think so too. I mean, there's some other ones I definitely put in there as well, but like, so I wouldn't say it's the best of the decade or anything, but it's like, it's up there, definitely, for sure. And it's kind of interesting how this show kicked off with like a huge amount of popularity and cultural significance. And a lot of that kind of died away season by season as the show progressed. Like it's kind of, the cultural awareness of the show kind of drifted off. But the show never declined, you know? I think it got a little heady for some people, and I don't mean that as an insult to people that didn't like it anymore.
I think like the year off kind of did it, hurt it too. Like,
yeah, the gap.
Yeah, the year gap. I think a lot of people kind of just forgot about it. So it's a shame. It's a shame that this last season wasn't as popular as, the previous seasons, but it is what it is.
That it wasn't in the cultural zeitgeist as much as the
right. Yeah, it wasn't like
first season. It's not just the previous seasons, because the show started waning in popularity.
Yeah, it wasn't in the
two.
Culturals. Like I didn't see anybody outside of like TV geek circles talking about Mr. Robot this year, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame because as a whole product, it's really interesting. It'll also be really interesting as a rewatch, especially with the best twist this season, which wasn't the actual like final twist, but the twist that came before it in the play structured episode about him being molested, and how that recontextualized so many scenes throughout the series, but also the final twist about the mastermind.
Also how it explained Elliot like that's the source of his trauma. That's the source of the trauma that created the alters that Elliot developed.
Yeah, so like having that recontextualized element, also seeing it from the perspective of it not being actually Elliot this whole time.
Yes.
Will be kind of interesting to kind of re-explore that and see how things kind of appear differently than they did on the first viewing.
It's definitely it's definitely a show that warrants a rewatch. Just amazing. Like, and very few shows, like, you finish and you go, yeah, that warrants a rewatch.
Maybe we'll do something on, like, the 10-year anniversary. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
We got a big, massive rewatch coming up this next year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're gonna get lost.
Yeah, we're going to get lost in rewatches.
Yes.
So maybe we'll do a Mr. Robot one sometime down the line. Give it some time.
Yeah,
kind of settle.
Give it some time. Yeah, let's not rush right into that.
Yeah. But that's it for Mr. Robot discussion. So all we have really left to do is talk about what's coming up in the week ahead, or in the couple weeks ahead. Used to say till the end of the year, but this episode we're recording on December 30th. So we're already at the end of the year.
This is the last episode of the decade.
Yeah.
Woo.
This is the last episode we're recording. We don't even know if this episode will get out in time.
Yeah, by the time you hear this, it'll be a new year and a new decade.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, even if I get this up tomorrow, like the chances that anybody listening to this will have listened to it by tomorrow are going to be slim.
Yeah. But if you post this up tomorrow, then technically this is the last episode of the decade. End of the year. But if you don't get up tomorrow, then the last episode we recorded was the last episode of the decade of the year. So technicalities.
Yeah. But this is the last episode we recorded this year, so.
Yeah.
Now that we've thoroughly confused you with pointless talk.
With just pointless, getting all anal retentive about things.
This is what's coming up in the next couple weeks, I should say. So, Monday, December 30th, as we're recording this, The Disastrous Life of Psyche K Reawakened, which is an anime series at Netflix. On Tuesday, December 31st, the last day of the year, The Neighbor comes to Netflix, as does Yangtze Palace Princess Adventures.
What?
On Wednesday, January 1st, the first day of the new year, Almost Family returns to Fox. Doctor Who has a New Year's special. They used to always do the Christmas specials, and now they're doing New Year's. I think that's also starting off their new season, but I'm not 100% on that. But that's on BBC America. And Messiah comes to Netflix. Then on Thursday, January 2nd, 2020, Deputy comes to Fox, and Last Man Standing returns on Fox. On Friday, January 3rd, Anne with an E begins its final season on Netflix. On Sunday, January 5th, Power returns to Starz, and the 77th Annual Golden Globe Awards airs on NBC. And you know what? It might be worth watching, because Ricky Gervais is back as host. So he's pretty vicious to the crowd. So that might be actually pretty pretty fun. On Monday, January 6th, Manifest returns to NBC for some reason that escapes me. On Tuesday, January 7th, Blackish, Mixed-ish, and Emergence all return to ABC. FBI, FBI Most Wanted, and NCIS all return to CBS. Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist begins on NBC. The Haves and Have-Nots comes to OWN, and Schitt's Creek returns to Pop. On Wednesday, January 8th, Modern Family, Single Parents, Stumptown, all ABC, Criminal Minds on CBS, and the Party of Five remake comes to Freeform. I bet you're excited for that, Will.
Oh, yes, obviously.
But if it follows tradition, then the head of the family in this remake will be play Jack in the remake of Lost.
That's true.
Right? That's how things work.
But this remake does have Jennifer Love Hewitt, so why would I be interested?
On Friday, January 10th, Lincoln Rhyme Hunt for the Bone Collector comes to NBC, and AJ and the Queen comes to Netflix. On Sunday, January 12th, Sandition comes to PBS, and Outsider comes to HBO. That's the new Stephen King limited series with Jason Bateman. Then on Monday, January 13th, The Good Doctor returns to ABC, and The New Pope comes to HBO for its second season. On Wednesday, January 15th, The Goldbergs, Schooled on ABC, SWAT on CBS, 68 Whiskey on Paramount, Good Trouble on Freeform, and The Magicians on Sci-Fi.
Nice.
We got a lot of stuff coming up we need to start.
I was going to say,
scheduling into our podcast.
None of that sounds interesting. Then you brought The Magicians.
We need to figure out how that's going to slate into our podcast, though, because, man, we got some busy times coming up in January. We're going to have to figure something out. But, yeah, that's it for this week. Next week, if all things go according to plan, we will be discussing Watchmen, which had its full season, probably its full series, and we'll discuss that and the show itself hopefully next week. If not, then we'll do something else and talk about the week after or something. But that's our current plan for next week if we can make it stick. Till then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best